Bullets fly and chaos reigns in what could be the worst school shooting in the nation's history.
He came into the library and shot everybody around me, then put a gun to my head and asked if we all wanted to die.
Gunmen in trench coats and masks storm a suburban Colorado high school, spraying gunfire, sending frantic students running for their lives.
We ran into houses wherever we could go. We just went into any houses we could find.
Terrified parents wait for word. SWAT teams swarm the school, looking for the living, finding the dead.
When we did make entry into the library, it was a pretty gruesome sight.
2 suspects found dead. Who were they? Why did they do it? And after 8 school shootings in 2 years, many wonder, how could it happen again? Even the president seemed at a loss.
Perhaps we may never fully understand it. St. Paul reminds us that we all see things in this life through a glass darkly.
Tonight, the latest on the tragedy in Colorado. Should we have seen it coming? Can we stop it from happening again? A Dateline special, Killing at Columbine High. From our studios in New York, here is Tom Brokaw.
Good evening. It was the one place you used to think your child would be safe. Instead, our schools are turning into killing fields. It happened again today in Littleton, Colorado, and this time it was a massacre. 2 students dressed in black trench coats opened fire in a suburban Denver high school. This is the latest information that we have on the estimated number of those killed and injured. And then these questions. Why is this happening? What can be done to stop it? Tonight, the latest on the killing at Columbine High and a search for answers. We start with Chris Hansen as he takes us to the horror and the tragedy of this day in a Dateline minute by minute.
This is a very disturbing scene here. It's very chaotic. Police tell us there are even more victims still trapped inside the school.
It is a scene becoming sickeningly familiar. Gunfire and mayhem at a high school.
There were 2 suspects in the school at the time with shotguns and semi-automatic rifles.
Students who should be in class, instead running for their lives. Only by the end of the day would the scope of the tragedy become clear.
Possibly as many as 25 fatalities.
Brought in for security to try to help get wounded people out if we needed it. Unfortunately, when we did make entry into the library, it was a pretty gruesome sight.
The carnage was so great, the scenes so disturbing. The president went on national television tonight and promised to combat the epidemic of school violence.
We must do more to reach out to our children and teach them to express their anger and to resolve their conflicts with words, not weapons. And we do know we have to do more to recognize the early warning signs that are sent before children act violently.
It all began at about 11:30 this morning when 2 gunmen burst into Columbine High School in suburban Denver. There was gunfire, reports of explosions. Police and emergency personnel descended on the school. The whole terrifying scene played out on national television.
Well, it's happened again. There's been a shooting at a school in America.
Students poured out of the school, telling stories about their encounters with the young gunmen. Stories that sounded strikingly similar.
I saw them have weapons, black masks, black trench coats, and needless to say, I was very frightened. I saw some students running, and I felt lucky that I got away as fast as I did, and I thank the Lord that I got to hide where I did and they did not see me and blow me away subsequently.
We hear a shot, a loud bang, and then we hear some guy go, "Holy crap, there's a guy with a gun." So everybody starts freaking out. One of my friends goes up to the door and says there's a guy standing there. We evacuate to the corner of our classroom, and my teacher just doesn't know what to do because she's so freaked.
As the crisis unfolded, the images often outran the information. For much of the day, more questions than answers.
We really don't know how many suspects. We do feel like we're dealing with certainly more than one.
The police officer tells me they aren't sure if there are any more injuries because they really don't know what's going on inside the school.
There was mass panic, and apparently the gunman then moved into the library.
I have heard shots. We took cover behind our patrol vehicles, and it sounded like heavy shots, as in a long rifle or some kind of an automatic weapon.
We understand that there were at least 2 explosions earlier on.
Have you heard from any of your friends? Did all your friends get out okay?
I have no idea. I haven't heard from a single one.
In a high school of 1,800 students, literally thousands of parents, relatives, and friends were desperately looking for information about their loved ones.
The police are asking you not to call 911. They're trying to get an information number up.
We have parents calling the church trying to find out if their kids, if we heard anything, if we know anything.
And police really have their hands full just trying to keep people from just, driving right by this barrier. They've just had to run after people and stop them because obviously, parents are very concerned and with good reason.
The fear spread to a nearby elementary school.
The school is in lockdown. None of the kids can get out. No one can get in.
And at 1:45, 2 hours after the shooting began, as more students managed to escape Columbine High, their stories told on live TV described the brutality inside.
I was in the library, and the whole room was just filled with smoke, and I heard gunshots all over, and the 2 guys came into the library and were just shooting everyone that they could. And the girl who was sitting right across from me under the table was shot in the head right there. And, it was the worst feeling that I've ever had because, blood was just going all over.
Now, how did you manage to get away?
Once they left the library, we just kind of ran and were running towards the cop cars.
Swarms of police and rescue crews attended to those who could get out. Emergency workers showed up on their day off to help.
There are probably about 150 to 200 officers from 6 or 7 different districts. There are still a lot of questions unanswered. There apparently has not been communication established with the shooters inside the building.
But even though no one had talked to the gunman yet, a theory was forming on who they were.
And we understand from one witness, a student who goes to Columbine High School, that she describes a group that used to hang out, in her words, at the school, used to go by the name of Trench Coat Mafia.
Several student witnesses said they thought the shooters were part of a clique that wore black trench coats to school. One claimed to hear a young gunman say why he was doing it.
They were saying that, that they wanted to do this for their revenge. For the school, I guess, because, they're such an outcast at our school.
At 1:50, as SWAT team officers entered the school to get more kids out, others detained 3 students nearby.
We had 3 individuals that were ascending upon the school wearing kind of military camouflage fatigue type things. They were detained, and it appears they are associates of these gentlemen or good friends of these gentlemen.
Still, no word from the gunmen, whoever they were. But reports from local hospitals spoke of multiple gunshot wounds. One girl suffered 9 wounds to the chest. Student survivors were loaded on buses and taken to a nearby elementary school. Parents were frantic to find them.
My daughter Bethany Urban, I can't find her.
Some parents were reunited with their children, relief that defied words. Some students were still wondering what happened to their friends.
Who specifically are you looking for from your friends?
A couple of my friends, 2 Megans and Courtney and Nicole, and we're just trying to find them all.
Off the perimeter.
3:40 p.m. News reports indicate the female student with 9 chest wounds is out of surgery and incredibly is in fair condition. At least 2 other teens with multiple gunshot wounds are still in the operating room.
More students, still more.
3:50 p.m. Law enforcement officers continued to evacuate shaken students from the school, ordering them to run with their hands on their heads. Everyone is a potential suspect.
Hopefully none of these are any of those that were involved in the shooting.
For some, there is relief.
I don't know, our friends just showed up. So.
Yeah, and more people keep showing up, so we have more and more reason to be happy.
But many students are still unaccounted for. Inside Columbine High School, the extraordinary drama continues to unfold. SWAT teams combing every inch, searching for students, suspects, alive or dead. At 4:05, after a day of watching and waiting, Steve Davis, a spokesman for the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office, holds a press conference to deliver the sobering facts. The news is not good.
Right now, the latest update that I have heard is that we have approximately 15 to 18 people who have been transported to area hospitals. We do have some fatalities.
For the first time, Davis confirms there are fatalities. 2 suspects dead in the library. And Davis says the death toll inside could be as high as 25.
It's unknown whether those fatalities are students, faculty, or a mixture of both.
The scene inside, Davis says, is gruesome. Explosive devices were also found near the dead suspects.
The SWAT team from our department has been joined by at least 3 other SWAT teams from area agencies, and they are still currently working the area and the building, looking for additional victims and suspects.
A 3rd potential suspect, not at the school, has been taken into custody. But law enforcement officers say they still are unsure what was behind the deadly shooting spree.
Well, it appears to be a suicide mission, but one, I think we've had a lot of media attention on these things around the country, and you don't know how much that plays into giving somebody else an idea to do it.
While one student had speculated that revenge was the motive, another who was inside says there may have been more to it than that. Hate.
I looked out the window, and there's a kid with a trench coat and a shotgun throwing pipe bombs in the parking lot, and then he shot a girl outside. And then he came into the cafeteria, and you could hear, like, bombs and shotguns going off. And then he came into the library, shot everybody around me, then put a gun to my head and asked if we all wanted to die, and he was going to kill us if we were of color, and if we had a hat, and if we played sports.
And what did you do at that point?
I just started screaming and crying and telling him not to shoot me. And so he shot the girl. She shot her in the head in front of me. And he shot the black kid because he was black. And he shot him in the face.
To the families who have lost their loved ones, to the parents who have lost their beloved children, to the wounded children and their families, to the people of the community of Littleton, I can only say tonight that the prayers of the American people are with you.
As he addressed the nation on television tonight, President Clinton reflected on the agony of a small Colorado community and the nation as he promised help.
I've asked the Attorney General and the Secretary of Education to stand ready to assist local law enforcement, the schools, the families, the entire community during this time of crisis and sorrow. A crisis response team is ready now to travel to Colorado, and I strongly believe that we should do whatever we can to get enough counselors to the families and the children as quickly as possible.
No one can overestimate the work crisis counselors do. But after Pearl, Mississippi, after Paducah, Kentucky, after Jonesboro, Arkansas, and Springfield, Oregon, parents, teachers, and students are asking when the day will come when crisis counselors won't have to be sent in the first place.
Joining us this evening from Littleton, Colorado is Dan Abrams, who's been there all day long. Dan, what's the status of the investigation, especially about those explosive devices that were left around the school?
Well, Tom, first of all, the SWAT teams and the bomb squads have actually left the building, meaning the actual school premises. That's allowed investigators to really just begin their work, to begin identifying the victims, to begin examining the crime scene. Now, they had cordoned off about 3 blocks around the school for fear that there would be more explosive devices there. Remember, these were kids who weren't just using handguns, they were using all sorts of explosive devices. The police were concerned that they might have booby-trapped certain areas. Various students had shrapnel wounds, so they wanted to be very careful. But as of right now, we're being told that they have not detonated any devices in the surrounding area around the building, but the bomb squad is still working outside of the building as the investigators work inside.
And what about identification of those people who were found dead in the library?
They're saying that's a long way away. So a lot of families are going to have a long night ahead of them. The coroner is going to be the one ultimately to identify the victims and maybe the ones who actually call their family members. That's going to make it a very tough night for people who are wondering where their children are.
Any idea about how many of them were faculty members and how many of them were students?
We have no sense at this point except from eyewitness accounts from various students. And the only accounts we've heard from students so far have been that it's been students who were shot. But keep in mind, we have been told officially that it is a mix of both faculty members and students. The exact numbers we don't know.
And what about the suspects themselves? Are they confident now that those two who were found dead are the only suspects, or is there somebody still at large?
They say the investigation is continuing. Remember, they stopped a number of other people who they believe may have been associates of those two, but they are continuing the investigation, and they said that really it's just beginning as they finally get into the school building.
Dan Abrams, thank you very much. I'll be right back.
Coming up, he came face to face with a gunman and survived.
I started shooting, just anybody who was walking, talking, didn't matter, boom, they shot.
Hear his eyewitness account. Plus, while another town mourns the loss of its children, the question, how can the survivors ever resume normal lives?
Any kind of traumatic, life-altering, life-threatening situation will have effects for many people for the rest of their lives.
The long-term effects of unbearable trauma. When our Dateline special, Killing at Columbine High, continues. Dateline NBC, winner of 6 National Headliner Awards, the year's most honored television news magazine. Dateline will be right back.
We saw that tragedy in Colorado unfold today from a safe distance, most of us, on national television. Horrifying as it was, most of us can only imagine the terror of actually living through it. This 18-year-old did live through it after coming face to face with one of the gunmen. And he told his story to our Denver affiliate, KUSA.
Got 2 teachers, a cook, another woman, and another guy into this bathroom. And we sat there for at least 30, 45 minutes. Finally, I started figuring out these guys shot to kill for no reason.
So these guys with the trench coats, clearly they're just unbelievably heavily armed, and they're just like spraying
They
across.
just started shooting. Just anybody who was walking, talking, didn't matter. Boom, they shot. They didn't care. And that was the sick part about it. And I don't know, man. It's scary.
Could you tell who they were?
No, I don't. All I saw was big black trench coats and guns, man, and bombs, lots of bombs.
So were they throwing bombs?
Threw it down in the parking lot. They threw it inside the school in the commons area. I mean, I saw this teacher running, and he said he just looked at me, and a bomb went off. I don't know where he went. You know, I got into this teacher lounge and went in the bathroom. Finally, I figured out that people on top were trying to get a hold of other people. We didn't know where anybody was. I got the teachers and everybody else out. Went back in. I got on the vent, and I fell 18 feet, and I got out because my leg was hurt.
So there were like several, maybe dozens of people up in the crawl space above
At least
the
4
first
that
floor?
I know of, 4 or 5.
Just crawling.
Trying to find people and trying to figure out where the shooters were so they didn't get shot or at least other people out.
Were these suspects, the guys with the guns, who apparently, the best we know, they're dead and they're accounted for, were they yelling anything at anybody?
Quiet. Didn't say anything, wasn't cussing, no profanities, no nothing. They just, you know, the guys, when he looked at me, the guy's eyes was just mean. He just didn't care. No feeling, no nothing. It's just, I said, okay.
So you made eye contact with him?
When the guy was at the barrel, he just looked at me and I looked at him and he's shooting. I went on right.
Any idea what may have provoked this?
I have not a clue. I don't know why anybody would do this. I don't know. I guess it would take anybody. It doesn't matter if you're downtown, suburbia, it doesn't matter. If it's just one crazed person, you know, anybody can have the mind just to go up and shoot people for only any given intentions, you know.
Any truth at all that there was, you know, animosity between different sects, different cliques of the school that would possibly lead to one clique bringing guns and taking on another?
No, because no, I don't believe that at all. I think these people came in, didn't care what race, what nationality, didn't matter if you're a jock, nobody. They shot people. I went to the hospital, saw my friend. She told me a story. She was up in the library. People got under the tables, cleared the tables, and started shooting under the tables. You know, whoever these people were, they didn't care what you were. They didn't care what race you were. It didn't matter if you. It doesn't matter. They didn't care. They wanted to shoot to have fun. I don't know. Sick people hurt innocent people, and I don't know. I feel really sorry for them. I really do. It's not a jock or any issue. None to the contrary. None.
Just senseless violence?
Some crazy kid who's very, very messed up.
They held a memorial service tonight in Littleton, Colorado, and there the faces told the story. Shock, anguish, young people and their families praying for those who were killed and those who barely survived the shooting. There have been 8 school shootings in this country in the past 2 years alone, and each time children and their families had a very grim lesson in coping with the unthinkable. Tonight, a look at that trauma, the toll that it takes, what the future may hold for those who witnessed the killing at Columbine High. Here's Dawn Fratangelo.
I don't know. Children witnessing the unthinkable, gunfire and murder in their schools. It's happening again and again. 1 year ago in Jonesboro, Arkansas, bullets tearing through a teacher, friends dying in front of them. Just 4 months earlier in Paducah, Kentucky, 3 students are killed during a morning prayer group, gunned down by a 14-year-old classmate. And now, gunfire and hostages inside a Littleton, Colorado high school. What may be the long-term effects of witnessing something so gruesome? Can children ever be free of images so brutal? Recent history has taught us the sights and sounds of today may never go away.
It seems like black and white images, basically, just like a little old movie.
Like students in other school shootings, Vachette Siem thought he was in a safe place, his school in Stockton, California. But suddenly that haven became hell when a 26-year-old drifter with an AK-47 opened fire on students on the playground, most of them Cambodian refugees. When it was over, 5 were dead, 29 injured.
We heard pop, pop, pops. I just blanked out, basically. And that's when the teachers told us to move away from the door and stand by the walls and watch until everything's clear.
The details are so vivid, but Vachette's terrifying experience didn't happen weeks ago or even months ago. It took place a decade ago when Vachette was only 11 years old. Amazingly, Vachette wasn't in the middle of the gunfire, but he did see the bloody bodies of his classmates. That alone was enough to cause great trauma.
We saw children being wheeled, the wounded being wheeled into that area just for protection until the emergency helicopters had arrived. Maybe as an adult I would have been able to help, but... And again, I was in class, so I don't know how much I would have been able to help anyway, besides just getting hurt myself.
It's a common reaction, survivor's guilt. And what Vachette and many other victims of violence are finding is while the traces of blood may have been easy to wipe away, the emotional scars have been almost impossible to erase.
So any kind of traumatic, life-altering, life-threatening situation will have effects for many people for the rest of their lives.
Psychologist Elizabeth Carl helped to create the nation's first organized trauma response plan, used by counselors and the Red Cross. It's a guide on how to help victims of trauma, like children who witnessed their classmates being killed.
I think we're just now starting to recognize as a society that these kind of traumatic events take far longer to recover from than we had ever anticipated.
Longer, she says, than most people realize.
As a society, do we sometimes give a time limit to these syndromes?
Oh, absolutely. Everyone recognizes there's an anniversary date, but on the first anniversary. We forget there's a second, third, fourth, and fifth anniversary.
With violence at what most students consider a safe haven, psychologists say it's unlikely any of them will walk away unscathed.
Initially, maybe they don't feel it going through. They're holding back, they're denying, but anyone who experiences such a traumatic event eventually will have to deal with it on one level or another.
For those students who've already been through deadly school shootings, news of another incident can bring it all back.
When there's like the shooting in Arkansas and there was the shooting in Scotland, I relived some of the events, just the flashbacks.
Post-traumatic stress followed Vachette through his teenage years. He had recurring nightmares, has felt mistrustful of strangers, and unsafe.
I feared maybe there'd be drive-bys or something like that, because at night at times I do hear some gunshots or something that sounded like it.
During the initial stages of trauma, Dr. Carl says children may be anxious. They may have problems sleeping and eating. They may even begin to act more childlike, clinging to their parents. Or the opposite could happen. They could become withdrawn or leery of people they once trusted, and their outlook could become tainted.
For some children, they may worry about the future, have a feeling that perhaps they don't even have a future.
Fatalistic?
Absolutely. Fatalistic.
How long could these go on?
Go on for weeks, months, and for a few percentage, a small percentage, it may go on for even longer than that.
And there's something else parents should be aware of in the recovery process. Those children who appear strong, even stoic now, or those students in Paducah who immediately offered forgiveness to their classmate accused of the shootings can have problems down the road. Dr. Carl says symptoms have a way of sneaking up on victims.
If one feels that it's important to keep a strong facade, and I'm not going to let this beat me, then they may likely be able to repress it for a while, but eventually they will have to deal with it.
It's not just the students in Littleton who have to deal with it, but also children across the country who may worry it could happen to them. Dr. Carl has this advice for parents. Offer comfort and support. Talk to your children, but don't force them to speak. And be realistic. Don't tell your children everything is going to be okay.
It's different to tell someone that they're going to be okay as opposed to something like this will never happen again. Can you guarantee that someone will be safe and this would never happen again? No.
And Vishet Siem, now 21 years old, knows that firsthand. He had only a few sessions of counseling after the 1989 elementary school shooting. He says then he couldn't talk about it. What did help later was talking with others who had lived through it with him and accepting the worst can happen.
What I can say is let your emotions out, share what your experiences are. Although it is bad, it's better to let go, let it out, but instead of keeping it inside because it hurts more.
Psychological effects of trauma can be long-lasting, of course. They can resurface months, even years after the incident, and for that reason, doctors do recommend immediate counseling for anyone who has experienced such a traumatic event. And joining us now from station KPRC in Houston, Texas, is Scott Poland, a nationally recognized school psychologist who has helped other schools deal with shootings and other crises, including the schools in Jonesboro and Paducah, Kentucky. Beginning tomorrow in Littleton, Dr. Poland, who needs the help most, the parents or the kids, or is there a difference between the kind of help that they'll need?
Well, Tom, I've seen the pain of these communities firsthand. I believe it is very important that we help parents understand that children's reaction to trauma fall into the categories of fear of the future, regression academically, regression behaviorally, and they have nightmares and night terrors. Every student and every member of that school community has a story to tell. We must listen to that story, allow them to vent those strong emotions, and help restore a sense of safety and security in that community.
Dr. Poland, thank you very much. We'll be back with more on the killing at Columbine High right after this.
Coming up, his mother couldn't control him. It seemed no one could.
I was afraid that his next step was going to be murder or something in prison.
His next step? 12-year-old boy.
Could he be saved by a controversial new approach to helping troubled kids? When our Dateline special, Killing at Columbine High, continues. Dateline NBC, winner of the Livingston Award for Outstanding National Reporting, the only television program honored, the year's most honored news magazine. Dateline will be right back.
It appears there may have been warning signs of today's tragedy. For instance, this website called the Trenchcoat Mafia. It did mention death and apocalypse. It referred to lyrics from a German techno-rock group and quoted a German slogan, "I am an outsider." There are also reports that police may have known about the suspects, that one of them may have built pipe bombs at his home, and apparently there were threats against classmates before today's shooting. But as in other recent school shootings, were signals sent out by the troubled kids ignored until it was too late? What if you're the parent of a troubled child sending out signals of his or her own? How would you know where to turn for help? Here's Mike Taibbi.
It was like a stick of dynamite that somebody was standing off to the side with a match and kept lighting the fuse.
Betty Neal is talking about her son Tommy, 9 years old then, and with a 200-watt smile masking a powder keg temper.
I was destructive, you know. Just like if I got, like, ticked, I'd, like, throw a glass or something, you know.
Every time Tommy blew up, I didn't know if I'd have a house standing when he got through.
Fits of anger and threats of violence were destroying the family.
If I had a vase that was old, that was sitting on the table, it was nothing to just pick it up and throw it at me. Pick up his cat and sling him around. Poor cat.
Tommy began collecting weapons. His mother was beside herself with worry, for now Tommy's outbursts were not happening just at home. She'd get a frantic call from Tommy's school, too.
And telling me I needed to get to the school immediately. And walking in and finding a teacher's aide sitting the straddle of my son's back. He's screaming, "Get her off of me." She's saying he can't control him.
There were suicide threats.
Oh, he didn't just make the threat. He would actually grab the knife and put it to his throat.
Did you think he was capable of suicide?
Yes.
And threats of murder. What did you hear Tommy say that frightened you?
You just wait till you go to sleep. You might be bigger than me, but you wait till you go to sleep, and I'll get you. I'll stab you, or I'll set you on, I'll burn you. If I have to burn the house down to get you. And that used to scare me to death, because I never knew.
When he was 9, Tommy was diagnosed with attention deficit disorder and started in a special school for problem kids. But despite years of counseling, the uncontrollable raging continued, sometimes 4 or 5 times a day. Were his expressions of anger serious expressions of anger?
Yes.
Were they violent?
Yes.
Were they chronic?
Yes.
He fits the profile of somebody who's heading...
Right straight down the road for a mass murderer.
In the past, a boy like Tommy would probably have been taken out of the home and ultimately might have been jailed or hospitalized or given some form of tough love treatment. But Tommy and his mom were lucky. In their South Carolina town, there was a new way to deal with a crisis like theirs. It's called multi-systemic therapy, or MST, a fancy name for a program that keeps the at-risk kid in the home and aims intensive therapy and understanding and compassion, not just at him, but at his peers, his teachers, and especially his parents.
Here was a mother who knew that her son was having some very serious problems.
Sociology professor Del Elliott runs the Center for the Study of Prevention of Violence at the University of Colorado and has conducted a nationwide study of programs like MST.
10 years ago, you and I wouldn't be having this conversation. 10 years ago, the research community was saying, there isn't anything we can demonstrate works. We've had a major breakthrough in the last 4 or 5 years.
Here's how MST works. The therapist assigned to a case like Tommy's spends an average of 4 months, including about 60 hours of direct contact with him and with the people who most influence his life. Tommy needed to understand the possible reasons for his rage, learning he was adopted, having an absent father, hating his older sister, and he had to find ways to control his anger.
I wanted them to at least help me to learn how to deal with him, to help him get rid of the anger, help him to stop feeling like he was lost.
Therapy for Betty meant learning how to discipline Tommy and how to manage the stresses and conflicts in her own life.
And he had to get me back together before we could get Tommy together.
But 4 months, 60 hours, would it work? Elliott says the best way to head off an explosion with terrible consequences is to get one of these prevention programs in place early.
They're not guaranteed to work in 100% of the cases. I'd go to Las Vegas anytime with the kind of odds that these programs give me.
And they're certainly not free.
And they're not free. But you're either going to pay me now or you're going to pay me later.
And what about Tommy Neal? He's in a normal high school, an eager member of the ROTC. He continues his therapy and he's got his anger under control. And he has no interest in looking back. Things were tough then, right?
That was then, this is now, you know. Let it be forgotten.
And what about Tommy's mother, Betty? She cannot forget the way things were, or the way Tommy and she were given the tools to escape all but certain disaster and shape a new life, a real one. Where you used to think that he wasn't far from being the bad seed. You think that now he's not that at all? He's a good kid?
I would stake my life on Tommy right now. Parents don't want to admit, cliche, my son or my daughter needs professional help.
And protects him and maybe protects others too.
That's right. Because I want to save my son's life. And who knows, in the process, I might be saving someone else's.
Joining me now from Philadelphia is clinical psychologist Linda Welsh. Linda, tomorrow a lot of school administrators and parents are going to be looking for trouble signs in their own schools or within their own families. What should they be looking for after Littleton?
Well, I think you look for kids who are withdrawn, depressed, anxious, having difficulty sleeping, just seemed agitated. So it really runs the spectrum. And often we just write that off as adolescence, but in a situation like this, we have to look at more critical causes.
Have we had enough of a national dialogue about these dysfunctional children in your judgment?
Not at all. I mean, clearly the families that I see are feeling helpless and hopeless and have no place to go for help, support, education. As Tommy's mother said, if she had only learned tools and given the skills, and when she did, she was able to deal with such a difficult situation. But normally it's not available.
Where would you turn if you were in a city, say, in the Midwest, and you were worried about all of this?
Well, the first thing I would do is call the local hospital and ask for psychiatric or psychological services, but too often there's waiting lists and there's dead ends. So I think groundswell community support is the place to go. Town meetings, authorities to the school situation, anybody who can organize a group and get some action.
Linda Welsh, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Were there any warning signs in advance of today's attack? We turn now to investigative reporter and anchor Ward Lucas from our Denver affiliate, KUSA. Ward, what do we know about these suspects?
Well, we're learning more and more, obviously, as the minutes and hours go by. But one thing I see that amuses me almost is a wire service dispatch that says authorities and school district officials said they had never heard of the group. I personally talked to a couple of teachers today who knew all about the trenchcoat mafia. Students were very familiar with the trenchcoat mafia. We ran the AOL profile on the one chief suspect. And the last line, a personal quote, says, shut up and shoot it. Quit whining. It's just a flesh wound. Kill them all. These certainly are warning signs that something's wrong in a couple of troubled minds.
Ward Lucas, thank you very much. We'll have the latest from Littleton from the scene when we return. I'll be right back.
Dateline NBC, winner of 6 Clarion Awards for outstanding journalism, more than any other news magazine. The year's most honored news magazine, Dateline. We'll be right back.
We still don't know much about the killers who opened fire at Colorado's Columbine High today, but one thing we do know is that they were heavily armed. So where did they get their guns? How can we keep guns out of the hands of children? The woman you're about to meet has a plan. She wants gun owners to be held responsible for crimes committed with their weapons. Last year, Congress killed the bill that she was lobbying for. This year, she's back again, and her crusade is very personal. Here's Sarah James.
To every gun owner in America, I want to say, please, please, for the sake of the children, lock up your guns. Don't let your gun become an instrument of murder.
Suzanne Wilson is a new recruit in the campaign for juvenile gun control. There she was standing beside the president, and then on Capitol Hill, with members of Congress telling anyone who would listen that something has to be done to keep guns out of children's hands.
It's okay to own guns. It's okay to have as many as you want. But if you're going to own guns, then you need to accept the responsibility for the guns.
Wilson enlisted in the crusade for juvenile gun control when her 11-year-old daughter, Brittany, and 4 other people were gunned down in the schoolyard in Jonesboro, Arkansas.
She should have never had to die this way because some man had the right to own as many guns as he wanted and store them any way he chose.
The boys who committed the murders had broken into a grandfather's home and taken the unsecured guns from inside.
In all the school shootings and all the children that die with guns, there are several issues that come into play. But the one constant in all of these is that these children had access to a gun.
Carolyn McCarthy is determined to ease Suzanne Wilson's pain, a pain McCarthy knows all too well.
Gunfire on a commuter line. Dozens of people are shot by a lone gunman.
5 years ago, McCarthy's husband was killed and her son seriously wounded when a gunman opened fire aboard the Long Island Railroad. In Congress, McCarthy is the primary sponsor of the Children's Gun Violence Prevention Act.
What to you is the most important aspect of it? Taking the responsibility of the adults and the parents with the guns in the homes.
This is only going to stop certain kinds of cases, not all of them. What does it do about guns that are stolen?
We can't stop everyone that's bent on trying to steal a gun and do something like that. It's not a perfect bill.
What's the worst that could happen with a firearm? You could kill someone. You could be killed.
McCarthy's bill would develop educational programs that go beyond hunter safety to teach about gun violence. It also requires new guns to be sold with trigger locks so that even if a child got the weapon, it would be difficult to use it without the key. Still, the heart of the bill is adult responsibility. McCarthy says she's not asking for disarmament, just common sense. To you, it seems like a completely logical idea.
Yes.
And yet this bill is languishing.
Yes.
Why?
Well, unfortunately, we have an extremely strong gun lobby that don't want any kind of restrictions.
Oh.
But it's not just lobbyists who oppose the bill. Jim Senti is a successful Midwestern businessman and lifelong gun enthusiast who taught his children to shoot. Should you be held accountable if somebody uses one of your firearms and kills someone else with it?
Even if I lent a gun to some person that I thought was responsible, if they use it in committing a crime, I don't think I should go to jail.
But what's wrong with saying you've got the right to own a gun, but it's mandatory for you to have the responsibility to keep it locked up safely?
I don't know how safe is going to be safe enough, and I certainly don't want to go to jail for not being safe enough.
And Senti wonders if complying with the law would require buying a gun vault like this one, which costs $2,000. If, though, you're keeping a pistol in your house in addition to rifles, is that all the more reason why perhaps they should be kept under lock and key?
If I have a pistol under lock and key somewhere in my house and I wanted to keep it because I was concerned that things were going on where my life might be endangered by some criminal coming into the house, having it under lock and key won't do me any good at that point.
But would the legislation make a difference? Since 1989, 16 states have passed gun owner liability laws, but only 3 made violation a felony. According to the Journal of the American Medical Association, the laws have had a significant impact on accidental shootings by children, but not homicides.
We need certain controls that are reasonable and well thought out and well planned, but I'm not so sure this piece of legislation is one of those.
But Suzanne Wilson won't surrender.
I feel like that whatever I can do to stop the senseless dying of children by accidental shootings or intentional shootings, I want to do that. I just want to prevent this type of heartache.
Colorado, where today's shooting occurred, is one of 34 states that does not have a child access prevention law, or CAP law as it's called, on the books. Joining us once again now is NBC's Dan Abrams in Littleton, Colorado. He's been there from the beginning today. Dan, what's the latest on the investigation?
Well, Tom, the investigators apparently initially arrived at the scene hours ago, and then they decided that they didn't want to go in yet. So they called in the bomb squad and the SWAT team to do one more search of the premises before the investigators began. Now, we heard some pops back there. It is clear that they were doing some work with some sort of detonation. But the investigators are going to go in, begin the investigation, and ultimately, the family members are going to be identified. The suspects are going to be identified who have been, and then the family members are going to be notified, and they're going to move on to the investigation.
Dan, there's been some confusion about the suspects. We know that the police believe that 2 of them are dead, but there was a report there may have been a 3rd suspect as well. Anything new on that?
Well, all they'll tell us is that it's still possible. They don't want to rule out the possibility of a 3rd suspect. Again, because the investigation is still in its infancy, they don't want to say it's not possible there's a 3rd suspect out there. We have learned that they are investigating the homes of the two suspects, and it is possible that they will continue and look into other suspects as well.
Anything to these reports that there are other trenchcoat mafia gangs in other schools in the Colorado area?
We're just hearing from reports that a lot of the students here knew about this trenchcoat mafia, and that many people here are surprised that local law enforcement had never heard of them. Tom?
All right, thank you very much. Dan Abrams tonight in Littleton, Colorado. That's Dateline for this evening. We'll have more, of course, on the killing at Columbine High. Tomorrow on Today, Katie Couric in the area. And on Nightly News tomorrow night, I'll be reporting from Denver. Dateline Wednesday at 8, 7 Central Time. Now, stay tuned for your local news. I'm Tom Brokaw. For all of us at NBC News, good night.
Later on The Tonight Show, Jay analyzes this Billy Crystal guy, plus actress Rita Wilson and the rockin' tunes of Eagle Eye Cherry. Your local news is next.